morning. I'm Sam Howard. We live in a difficult time. Doesn't seem like we can turn the TV on that some disaster is happening somewhere in the world. Seems like we're all quarantined or bound up in a way that we really shouldn't be. We really don't know what is going on, but do we? How bad do we actually have it? Can you think of anybody you would trade places with today? These banners behind me says God's 2020 vision for our church. Who would have ever imagined the 1st of January that what's going on today is a vision? But is it? How many times in the Old Testament did God completely change what people thought, changed where they was going by adversity? Aren't we seeing that today? Maybe God is showing us just how far we've strayed from the Word. Or maybe out of great adversity will come great triumph. It happened over and over. None of us have ever went through what Daniel had to go through. Remember Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego? We've never had to experience that. Have any of us listening or watching today ever truly been in a famine? No, we haven't. So when you think about that for a moment, and you think about where you are in life, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you the story of a man named Will. Will was born in 1962. Parents were by no means wealthy monetarily, but they had all kinds of love. They had a big family. Will was the oldest of 6. Will was raised in church. Will can't remember the day that about 15 minutes till 10, unless you wanted to know what a willow or a hickory switch was and what it was used for, you'd probably be ready to go to church that morning. He's a better man for it. Will's mom was a praying mom. She was known as a prayer warrior and still is today. Something bad's going on, someone's gotten ill, a bad accident, Will's mom's phone rings. And the reason it rings is everybody knows Will's mom will hit her knees and start praying. And she won't quit praying until she believes she's got her answer or she knows she's done all she can do. Will's first experience of church truly and what it was a 9-year-old going to church camp for the first time. It was also his first vacation. He'd been in church all his life, and he gave his life to God as a teenager. Well, Will, like most, had to work for what he had. He can remember picking up rocks out of a farmer's field for 50 cents an hour when he was a teenager, but it was money that he didn't have. Will decided, everybody's got to go to college. So Will's going to go too. He lasted less than a month. Decided he was smarter than the professors. He was going to go to work. Well, he did. Married at 25. First daughter at 28. At 30, Will decides that he's going to start a business. Now understand, Will had a 3-year-old daughter, a 9-month-old daughter, a new house he'd moved into in November, and he started a business at 30 years old in January. Many said that he could never make it. Many thought he was crazy. But Will wasn't really crazy. He just believed he could do it. And he had will within him, even though the name Will, that he could do it. Things went well for Will. He had some struggles, had a lot of lean times. There was times that Will didn't know if he could make payroll the next week. There was times when it seemed like he could do no wrong, and there was times when it seemed like he could do no right. But Will never forgot one thing. He knew that every step of the way God was with him. And no matter what was going on, God had it under control, even if Will didn't understand how or why. Will had done very well. At 53 years old, Will was on top of the world. He'd started other businesses or was involved in them. The company that he'd started was the busiest it had ever been. And Will just thought, this is great. But on April the 18th of 2016, Will was perfectly healthy. But he went home that evening and he told his wife he just didn't feel well, which really, that was an anomaly for Will. He never got sick. He'd never had a broken bone in his body. He'd never had a major surgery. So he went to bed and woke up in the middle of the night and told his wife, we're going to have to go to the hospital. Something's not right. They get there and the doctors can't figure out what's going on. Something's just not right, but they believe it could be a mirage of things. So they give him some medicine, tell him to go back home. If it gets any worse, to come back. If not, go to see his family doc the next morning. The next morning, on the 19th of April, Will's hands and feet are numb when he wakes up. He decides he's going to, maybe it'll wear off and this medicine will help. By mid-morning, Will can't walk to the bathroom. Will's wife calls his office and asks for some help. Folks from the office come to help them. They get him in a vehicle and take him back to the emergency room. Will's diagnosed that afternoon with a very rare syndrome. By 6 o'clock on the 19th, 24 hours from when Will was perfectly healthy, Will was laying on a hospital bed. He could move not a muscle in his body. He had no body function control, but he could hear everything that was happening around him. Will very vividly remembers standing at the foot of his bed that evening was a deacon from the church Will had been raised in. And that deacon looked, and as he reached into his shirt pocket, he pulled out a bottle of anointing oil. And the deacon had just lost his son to an auto accident a few weeks before this. And he said, folks, we need to pray. And we need to pray right now. That will be the last thing Will remembers for nearly a month. The doctors keep him medicated tremendously. He spends 6 days at the local hospital, and they say they've done all that they can do, and they want to send him to a more specialized medical center, which they do. He spends 17 days there in the ICU before they transfer him to a specialty hospital because he's now on a ventilator. He's now on a feeding tube. And that hospital gets told, and Will gets there, do the best you can. Will probably never get off the ventilator, probably never get off the feeding tube. Will struggles, tries, there's good days and bad days. And Will's getting better. He got a little activity back in his upper body. And they send Will back to the big medical center to have a nerve study and a neurological exam by the head neurologist. That just happened to be 4 years ago next Sunday on Will's wife's birthday. The doc come back in after doing the study, and he said, I got good news and bad news, Will. Good news is you're getting some activity. The nerves are regenerating. What Will had gotten had affected both his motor and sensory nerves. But he was getting some activity in his limbs and his upper body. He can now move his head and shake his shoulders. He would shake his shoulders at his grandchildren to make them laugh, or grandchild that would make her laugh, and those that come to visit him. But the doc also had some bad news. He told Will, you're never going to get out of the wheelchair. There's no activity from the waist down, no nerve regeneration. You'll never be able to stand up. You'll never be able to walk. Well, that put Will in a pretty dark place for several days. And as Will laid in the bed as he had done before, when things just didn't seem that anything was going to fix anything, and it was so bad that Will couldn't stand it anymore, he looked through the back of his eyelids and said, Lord, I've tried it my way. You're going to have to fix this because I can't. And it wouldn't be just a few minutes or maybe a day or two. Things would turn around because God was on the scene and God had control. Well, Will told God, pastor of the church that I was raised in has been in a wheelchair for 35 years. Still hunts, fishes, and works on old cars. Happiest man you ever seen. And you know what? There's a young man that Will knows that's in his mid-20s or late 20s. One of the smartest, brightest young kids ever to come out of the county that Will was raised in. Had a couple of degrees from a couple of state universities, had a master's, was going to do a work study abroad. Had a terrible accident around Thanksgiving. Spent many, many weeks and months in the hospital, same as Will had. But the young man was still working, still trying to get better, and his family was still around him. Will had that support too. Not only did he have his family, he had his God. So Will decided it's time for you to kick yourself in the tail and just do what you can do. Whatever happens, happens, and we'll accept it. Well, they transferred Will from the big university hospital to a rehab center, a nursing home, where he was trying to get better. And when Will was first stricken, can't really, hillbilly English isn't good sometimes, Will's mom prayed for a miracle. She never quit praying for that miracle. She expected God to answer her. Will and his mom was sitting alone in the rehab room one day, and his mom had been praying. And it come to Will, and he said, "Mom, how do you know your answer to your prayer? You didn't get it." His mom looked at him kind of puzzled, and he says, "Mom, I'm still alive. Your prayer might have been answered that I'm still here today." Now, Will continues to struggle. It took Will 11 months and 2 weeks to get out of the hospital or rehab. That was about 3.5 years ago. Today, Will still struggles. He still has good days and bad days. But every day, Will tries. He has not given up on getting better. He went from taking 3,200 milligrams of gabapentin plus oxycodone plus a fentanyl patch all at the same time to today he takes none of it. Almost unheard of with what Will has. But this vision behind me on these banners is a little bit of Will's story. We don't know what God's got in store for us today, tomorrow, or next week. We don't know what he's got in store for us, for our country either. But I do know one thing. Whatever it is, we can handle it. There's many will tell you that God never gives you more than you can handle. That's not right. I don't believe that. Not for a minute. I believe God regularly gives you more than you can handle. And it's those times when God gives you more than you can handle, you can look back at the song or the saying, "Footprints in the Sand." What that says is, when it's too tough for you to handle it, and when you've decided that you've done all you can do, just give it to God. He'll not only handle it, he'll pack you when you need it. Now, as the band comes back, or a praise band comes back and gets in place ready to sing, I want to finish with something. I've got a therapist that's done a lot of work with me. Just happens to be a good friend and just happens to be standing here. She don't know I'm going to say this, but I'm very proud of what she does, not only for our church, but for the people that are in this church. She goes the extra step. Now, I'm going to do something here, I think. I don't know. God does. But, there's times, just like that, there's times when you got to step out on a limb. You got to decide, can I do this or can I not do this? Well, there's times that only God knows, but we're going to see. doctor, he was a pretty smart man, educated in probably the best schools in the world. That doctor didn't know the doctor that Will knew, or if he did, he didn't believe in the doctor as well as Will did. Because the thing of it is, the doctor doesn't know what God's going to do, and none of us do. Now, you know what? Me and God, we're going to take this set of legs right here that doctor said would never work, and we're going to walk over here, and we're going to sit down and listen to this next song. And yeah, for those that ain't quite figured it out yet, I am Will. And there's a line in this song coming up you need to remember. It's a line taken from another song. It says, "'Cause the God of the mountain is still God in the valley." And folks, when you're down in that valley and you can't see and you can't breathe and you just don't know where the next breath's going to come from, you look up and say, "Lord, help me." And he'll be right there with you. God bless you all.